So are Danny and Nia from the Valley in a cult? If you watch the Valley, you know them as this God-loving couple with four kids under 4 years old who seem to be drama-free. But if you watch the Valley, you know that's not true. Well, I saw recently that they tagged Mosaic Church, and it was such an aha moment for me because I've done a bunch of research on Hillsong and churches related to Hillsong, and Mosaic is one of those churches. And in case you missed it, it was just about 2 years ago when Bethany Joy Lenz called out this same church for being a cult. She said she attended it for 10 years and it was a high control group that really wanted you to donate, and volunteer, like more than any other churches she had attended. And Erwin McManus, who owns Mosaic Church, is so intertwined with Hillsong. He's done a bunch of appearances at the Hillsong conference, and him and his son had a podcast on the Hillsong network. And Erwin wasn't implicated in the Hillsong money laundering scam where pastors and preachers and people who own churches across the globe were intertwined with Hillsong, where they would do speaking engagements and pay into it was basically like an MLM, but with a lot of money being transferred to Hillsong. And because they're all churches, it was tax free and kind of under the radar. But it was outed by an Australian newspaper like 2 or 3 years ago. Anyways, I'm not saying that Erwin was part of that scam, but he did do a lot of these guest speaker appearances for Hillsong. So who knows what that payday looked like for him. I mean, the payday must have been pretty good because he was featured on Preachers and Sneakers. And if you know anything about that Instagram page, they like to show preachers who have an exorbitant amount of wealth that they literally wear while they talk to crowds of people that they encourage to donate money to them. And there are a lot of problems with Hillsong, one of them being that they're anti-LGBTQIA and they're very misogynistic. And what's so wrong with Hillsong? Well, it was founded by a guy who used that church to commit violent crimes against children. And then they used the money from that church and the music that they made to pay off those children once they became adults. And then his son took over the church once he passed away and denied that any of this happened, even though he knew his father was paying off these adult children. But he's been acquitted of that, so I guess we can't say that he did that, but I believe that he did that off the record. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's why we don't like Hillsong, hun. Oh, and let's also not forget that Mosaic raised $2 million in 2019 because they were going to have to either move or buy the church that they were in. So they're like, let's buy the church. And then there was some issue where they ended up not being able to buy the church because they didn't get the money in time. So then they moved, but they kept all the money that they raised to keep the church. So they just got $2 million. And I'm pretty sure that would be tax-free since they're a church, right? Anyways, back to Danny and Nia. If you just saw this picture on Instagram where they're literally tagging their church to evangelize to their audience on Instagram of how picture perfect their life was, you wouldn't realize that one of them is a pageant queen who's just smiling through everything being on fire, and the other one is a voice actor who plays grab ass when he drinks too much. So, I mean, we know that from watching The Valley, but maybe not everybody else knows that. So, are they in a cult? I believe that they might be. They definitely attend a church with a lot of culty ties. And the guy who owns that church, the pastor or preacher, he is interesting. I feel like I could talk about him for a while. He calls himself like a futurist and he goes on a bunch of podcasts and he really thinks a lot of himself. I think that it is very culty leaning, and someone in my comments will definitely say, well, isn't every church like this? And it's like, yeah, isn't every church like this? But, you know, this one in particular has my spidey senses tingling for sure. And when I was watching the show and saw something about Mosaic, I was like, oh, like, I have definitely looked into them when I looked into all of the Hillsong stuff. So I would say it looks pretty culty, but I'm not going to straight out call it that because, you know, this is just for entertainment purposes or whatever. But what do you think?